meteorologist Chad Myers. Chad, what is the track showing now? We're watching what's happening in Bradenton. What's going on?
Well, the bulk of the worst part of this storm, considering that what we see from Anderson is not the worst, is now up in Orlando, all the way down toward Kissimmee. And then what Anderson is seeing is the back side of the eye, which is supposed to start calming down, but it certainly hasn't. What Anderson is experiencing, and you have to kind of follow the lines of the rain. When you follow the lines of the rain, Anderson is right there under the A in Palmetto. So the wind is blowing off the ocean all the way in a straight line and into that river walk. That's why we're getting that significant surge there. For all day long, the wind has been blowing the water out of Tampa Bay. And now, because we're going to switch it, because now the eye is that way, now the wind is going to blow the water back into Tampa Bay. We're not going to get 6 to 9 feet, but we will get maybe 2 to 4, because now as the wind moves away, changes direction, we start to push that water up there. St. Petersburg just had a wind gust to 82. So this is far from being done. Tampa just had a wind gust to 78. I think a big story here is how much rain has fallen. Everywhere that you see purple through here, that's 10 inches of rain or more. And we know St. Pete had 16 inches, of which 8 fell in 2 hours. 5 hours, 5 inches in 1 hour, 3 inches the next hour, and then it kind of slowed down a little bit. But there is significant flooding going on here. Lakeland, especially farther inland, because it doesn't have a chance to just wash back into the ocean. So it is going to be a flooded mess to the east of Tampa, and probably as far east as Orlando too. Right now, the latest advisory just came in. We're down to 100, but you can see what 100 just did to Tampa and what it did to Bradenton and Anderson Cooper standing right there.
Let's actually go back to Anderson right now, who remains in Bradenton. Anderson, the wind, the rain is now above your knees with the water. What are you experiencing?
So we moved from that location. That was just bananas, how much water is pouring over now. So we moved about, 200 feet or so, 300 feet up. So we're on higher ground. But it is just, there's a lot of water coming along the Riverwalk. I'm not sure how much longer that's going to continue for, which obviously Chad will be able to tell us in a little bit. But it is just, the wind is coming from the north. That's the north. Tampa's up that way. As Chad was saying, that wind is coming from the north down here. It will change directions, according to Chad, at some point. It's an extraordinary thing. I'm really struck. I'm sorry, what was that? Repeat?
I'm not sure what you're hearing for them say. Go ahead.
What are you seeing?
Let's bring in Bill Weir. We're having trouble hearing you, Anderson, at the moment. Let's bring in. Do we have Bill Weir, who's in St. Petersburg? We see him in front of the camera. Bill, can you hear us?
You got me?
Yep, we hear you, Bill. What are you experiencing?
Yeah, I got you, Laura. Hi. Can you see me? Yeah. So if anybody's been watching for the past several hours, you've been hearing me harping on about the tower cranes in St. Petersburg, that the city put out a warning and said, look, we know this is dangerous, but it takes months to disassemble these things. We just don't have the time, so be warned. Well, one of them came down right here on Central Avenue. As you can see, Carlos can zoom in down there. One of the 4 tower cranes downtown has collapsed in these winds. There's another one sort of right above us, so we're sort of keeping our distance. I hope you'll understand, we don't want to get too close down there. There was one, you can see the flashing lights, so one first responder at least knows it happened and came out. And it looks like it fell into a building on the left side of the street here, smashing into these lofts over here. According to social media, there's some pretty stunning pictures of the damage from that as well. And then, of course, there's Tropicana Field we talked about in the last hour, that Teflon roof that was ripped to shreds. One of our affiliate reporters gives us a look inside. Take a listen to this.
Something unbelievable to show you. This is Tropicana Field. The roof, a big portion of it, has ripped off. We're looking inside Tropicana Field. We are seeing extreme damage to Tropic. There was a report we saw online earlier of a fire, and we were waiting to confirm that, and now we just made it up to the 5th floor of the hotel we are in, and it's hard to believe what we're looking at.
Ironically, Tropicana Field, Laura, was a staging ground for first responders tomorrow. That plan may be changing as a result of that as well, but you're just getting a little glimpse of the violence of this storm between the cranes coming down that roof. Who knows what first light is going to reveal here in Pinellas County, Laura?
Bill, can you show us that crane again in the area? Because thinking about, as you mentioned, the violence of this storm, for it to be able to do that type of damage, let alone the Tropicana Field, but show us that crane area again, what you're seeing?
Yeah, it's really hard to get a shot on. Whoa!
Wow.
Just
engaging.
I don't get a sense of what we're zoomed in on there, but it's.
Well, Bill,
yeah,
we're watching right now the wind.
The crane is just sort of, if you can imagine. Right, yeah. But if you can imagine, this crane was mounted to the side of this tower that's under construction to the right of your screen there, collapsing to the left and onto the building across the street. Hopefully nobody's down here and that it didn't endanger anyone, but just as an indication of the force of these winds.
I want to go right to CNN's Brian Todd, who is in Tampa right now. Brian, the eye is now east of Tampa, but you're still getting hit pretty hard.
We sure are, Laura. You played that video of Anderson. I heard Anderson and our colleague Randy Kay talk about kind of a resurgence of the storm where they were in Bradenton and in Sarasota. We're kind of getting a resurgence of the storm here in downtown Tampa as well. The wind is still really pounding us. It is blowing the rain. Hold on. Something just shifted above us. There's been a transformer that has blown a few times above us. The street now is without power, and something just shifted above us, so we have to just really keep an eye out here. I'll talk about the transformers in a second because that's been a real issue here. But first, another extraordinary event that we were able to film just a few minutes ago is reverse storm surge in Tampa Bay. We ventured about 6 blocks away from here, and it was tough to get there because the roads are so flooded. We got to the edge of the bay, but we couldn't get right to it because the water and the road was so deep. So our colleague, Dougal McConnell, got out on his own, on foot, through the water, at real risk to his own safety, to film the storm, the reverse storm surge on Tampa Bay. And it was really extraordinary because it means that all the water, or most of it at least, in the bay got pushed out to the ocean. Reverse storm surge, it's a very rare occurrence, we're told. Our CNN weather team and I are kind of talking about what that means. It all got pushed out into the ocean. It looked almost like a dry riverbed. This video we're showing you of that, it was really extraordinary to see hardly any water in Tampa Bay. It looked like a dry riverbed, but we are told, of course, that what goes out has to come back in again. That storm surge is going to be pushed back into Tampa Bay, and we're going to see what that does to the actual water levels and see if it kind of tips over the edge of the bay there. Again, it's still very dangerous out here. The wind is just still kind of crushing us down here in downtown Tampa. Also, we have some video of a transformer that kind of arced out not too far away from us, and sparks shot out of it, and that happened on the transformer that's right above my head several times. This whole section of the city has lost power. Everything is on, the hotel behind me is on generator power. So you can see, and just look at the power of the rain and the wind that's hitting me right now. Even as the storm maintains Category 2 status east of here in Orlando, just take a look at what the tail end of this storm is doing to us here in Tampa still, Laura. It's really extraordinary. It's really rare that you see something of this strength and this duration in one place, and you kind of think of that magnifying itself over the entire region of western Florida, the Tampa St. Pete area, and it is still pretty relentless at this hour.
The transformers that you're experiencing, and again, please stay safe. I know you're saying something shifted above you, Brian. Are you seeing this pattern around the city? We know that 2 million people are already without power in Florida, but there's a danger, I guess you can't hear us, there's a danger that he's explaining to us about what's happening there. We've lost the audio with Brian Todd, but just underscores the real danger involved with these transformers sparking out. The 2 million people who are without power right now in Florida. There is a danger there, so people to be very, very vigilant continually. Hurricane Milton has made landfall. It has triggered tornado outbreaks all across Florida. And this large tornado crossing over I-95 on the eastern side of the state was one of at least 17 tornadoes reported. More than 110 tornado warnings have been issued across the state, and sadly, we have now learned that multiple people have been killed. I want to bring in Sheriff Keith Pearson, Sheriff from St. Lucie County in Florida. Sheriff, I'm so sorry to hear about the loss of life in your county. What can you tell us about the victims there? What happened?
You know, the earlier today, the first wave of this storm Milton came through. Our area is not used to seeing any kind of tornado activity. We had one tornado pop up. It actually struck our sheriff's office, taking out a 10,000 square foot red iron structure that was housing all of our emergency equipment in preparation for Hurricane Milton. Shortly after that, maybe 20 minutes later, all of our alarms have gone off. All the messages came out there. Our deputies reported at least visually seeing 6 tornadoes on the ground ripping through our county in a northern direction, leaving hundreds of homes devastated, completely totaled. And it unfortunately struck a retirement community that was mainly modular homes where we did have loss of life. And we have crews on scene right now working through the hurricane conditions that we're facing right now to rescue anybody who's still inside there. I mean, these trailers are just devastated. They're lifted off their foundation. You know, we're not going to get into how many, but I can tell you it's more than one person who's lost their life that we've already recovered. But again, we're focusing right now on getting all of our resources in there to rescue those individuals that could be trapped inside these homes.
Are the rescue operations confined to that particular community, or are you seeing this all around your county?
No, we're confined to about a half square mile radius. Although these tornadoes riddled our county, housings, you know, for miles on end, and other counties around us. But they were fortunate enough to make there's no loss of life there, just complete destruction. The loss of life that we're focusing on is a mobile home community. That's a 55 and older community. So we have elderly folks in there. We have the type of construction. It went right through the middle of this community, and it left a path of destruction there. Governor DeSantis had sent down the National Guard, which was here within an hour, as well as specialized search and rescue teams that specialize in that. So we have over 200 people, including our local fire rescue deputies, people that are out here. And right now, I'm outside. Our power keeps cutting out. We're facing, I would guesstimate, about a 50-mile-an-hour wind right now with gusts pumping up and down. And it's only going to get worse here. We're on the East Coast. I heard you reporting earlier. That's on the West Coast. So we're on the entire opposite side of the state of Florida, and we're feeling these effects here. We're having this devastation here. I just pray to God that anybody else who's facing the challenges of this storm could weather through and be okay. But our deputies and our troops are going to be out there during this storm to ensure that we rescue everybody who can be rescued.
Sheriff Keith Pearson, we will be following this. I want to start with CNN's Victor Blackwell, who is in Orlando, Florida. Victor, the center of Milton is nearing you as we speak right now. What are you experiencing down there?
Yeah, Laura, the winds have really picked up. What were the gusts maybe an hour or 90 minutes ago are now the sustained winds. They're sustained around 40 miles an hour. We recently saw a gust at the airport about 74 miles an hour. So the worst of what is coming from Milton is coming here to Orlando. Power outages are going up as those winds pick up as well. About 65,000 customers out here in Orlando and east toward the coast. And this really, for Orlando, is not a story about intensity. It's more longevity. the hours and hours of rain that will come here, the concern is about the localized flooding, much like what this area saw from Hurricane Ian in 2022. I checked in with local officials, and they've now pulled their officers and fire rescue off the roads in just the last 45 minutes because of the sustained winds at about 40 miles per hour. It's just not safe for them to go out. But they are anticipating in many areas the flooding around Lake Davis. The flooding around some of the retention ponds and lakes around Kissimmee as well. I'm not far from the Orlando parks, and Lake Bryan is nearby, so there are concerns about the flooding here. But as the winds pick up, those trees will come down. And give you a kind of look. Maybe you can see the wind and this rain that's now coming horizontal at some points because of the intensity. We checked in on shelters. They're getting us a shelter report across the county that's been opened, but the rain really here is the concern. The storm surge at the coast, but the amount of water that's coming in. The officials have been out, the crews have been out trying to clear the drains so that the storm water control systems can accommodate it, but they know with up to 15 inches of rain forecast over the next several hours that they will be overwhelmed. Our weather center tells us that about 3 inches has fallen so far, but this is just the beginning of what's coming to Orlando. So the dog that bit the coast is now barking at Central Florida. Of course, we'll be here throughout the night, Laura.
It's unbelievable to think about just the sheer scope and breadth of this particular storm. And you can't think about Orlando without thinking about the parks, as you mentioned. I know they were closing some today in anticipation of this very moment. I'm seeing some power around you, but 2 million people in Florida are without. Are you seeing power outages where you are? Are you learning of any injuries or damage that is right to the area right now?
So let's start with power. So the Orlando Utilities Commission, which covers most of Metro Atlanta, they're reporting about 25,000 outages. Duke Energy, that covers much of Orange County and the counties headed to the East Coast, they're reporting in this area about 40,000 customers without power. Now, as it relates to those people coming here for the parks, I spoke with a family that came all the way from the UK to be here to go to Magic Kingdom, Universal. They got 1 day of parks in, but of course they were closed on Wednesday at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, so they weren't able to go out and enjoy the rest of the time. But the hotel where I'm staying is really a mix of those who are trying to get out or hope to get out ahead of the storms, because that family from the UK, they've never experienced a hurricane, so they wanted to get away from the rain. And then you have those southwest coastal families who were in the Zone A evacuation areas who came here to get away from the coast. They've evacuated to this area. So some interesting conversations of people, being grateful that they are where they are, and people who are trying to get away from where they are here at this hotel. The rain has actually tested this hotel roof. It's leaking in a few places. The consistency of this heavy rain is testing this building especially. But as it relates to power outages, several thousand out, the expectation is that it could be much worse over the next few hours, but the safety crews, the police, the fire, they're not going to get a look at really how bad it's going to be until first light in the morning, and especially when those winds die down.
Well, we've got a lot going on right now. Back with following what's happening in Hurricane Milton. Fort Myers is now the locax. Joining me now, the mayor of Fort Myers, Kevin B. Anderson. Mayor, thank you so much for joining us. We are watching what's happening and what's unfolding all across Florida. What are you seeing right now where you are?
Well, we're finally starting to see the winds die down, but with that, we're also seeing the water that has come in from the river.
Mayor, our correspondent, Carlos Suarez, is in Fort Myers and said a couple of hours ago that the flooding was the worst that he had seen all night. Do you have a sense of what it's like right now in terms of the flooding and potential damage?
I was out there about 2 hours ago, and it wasn't, it was a little bit worse than Helene, but it wasn't quite as bad as Ian. So I'm estimating that probably down along the river about 3 feet, and as you get away from the river, it dies down.
That is significant. Just as you mentioned, Hurricane Helene, not even 2 weeks ago right now, a town has to brace for now both. And tornadoes, I understand. What about the tornadoes? I think that some have touched down in Fort Myers?
Yes, I believe we had at least two of them touch down. One of them took some pool enclosures and street lights and trees. The other one ripped the covering of the gas pumps at a convenience.
My goodness, thinking about that, we're seeing images right now of Fort Myers while you and I are talking, and the strength of that wind is unbelievable. You mentioned that what you're seeing now is perhaps not as bad as Helene, a little worse than Helene, but not as bad as Ian. Those two reference points are very significant. How is what you're seeing right now comparing to what we witnessed in Helene just a few weeks ago?
Well, like I said, we've got stronger winds and a little bit more water. The good thing about this storm is that our downtown businesses prepared for it. They didn't prepare for Helene or Ian, but this time they did.
Likely because that happened, which is one that perhaps if you could find a silver lining in preparedness, but the tornadoes add a whole different level. I mean, tornado warnings must impact a response to the hurricane. How does it make the response more challenging for your community?
Well, first of all, we were concerned about the debris the tornado created. We were able to get some crews out there and get most of it picked up. The thing with the tornado is because it's so unexpected and people can't plan for that.
Speaking of the plan, just remind our audience how challenging the recovery had been even from Hurricane Ian, let alone now two back-to-back hurricanes.
Well, we're used to it. If you can get used to it, I should say. Right now, that are just waiting for the storm to pass so they can get out there, start clearing the roads, and our response teams can get out there and start handling the calls for service.
Mayor Kevin Anderson, thank you so much for joining us. We're thinking about your community and hoping that the light of day does not bring the destruction anticipated. Thank you so much. Get right to CNN's meteorologist, Chad Myers, because Chad, we are seeing this ebb and flow of this storm. It's now a Category 1, but as you've heard from all of our correspondents across Florida, they're getting different versions of this same storm. What can you tell us?
I can tell you that a Category 1 with 90-mile-per-hour sustained can still have a gust to 100 to 105. It just does. So, yes, and this is the problem we've had really from north to south. Venice, your biggest problem is that your wind was from the west. That west wind was pushing the surge to you. We know there's flooding in Venice. We know there's flooding in Naples. We know there's flooding in Punta Gorda and all the way up toward Port Side where the wind was blowing offshore. Tampa, that's why you blew all the water out of Tampa Bay, just like Brian Todd was talking about. But in the meantime, it was raining. And in St. Petersburg, they picked up 16 inches of rain today alone. Up toward Lakeland, more than 10 inches of rain has already fallen. And look at this stripe of purple. I want you to notice that the purple is 10 inches of rain or more. And there's Orlando, maybe Orlando Executive, right there, all the way back to Tampa. Now, if we ever get a white part in there, that will be 20 inches of rain or more just in 24 hours. So far, so good on that. But, 10 to 12 is plenty. And the problem is, it's not 10 to 12 in a neighborhood that it can run off. It's 10 to 12 over an entire county. Where is it going to go? Just to the low spots, and that's where the problem is, and that's why we have those flash flood emergencies going on right now. The heaviest rain is according toward Orlando, toward Daytona, toward New Smyrna Beach. That's where most of the heaviest rain is. Why we still have wind in Tampa is because this is the backside of what was the secondary eye. Big storms like this can have more than one eye wall. And when the inner one gets so small that the outer one takes over, you get an eye wall replacement cycle, and the whole storm kind of goes down in wind speed. Well, this is one of the outer bands. This is still coming in, bringing wind speeds in the 60 to 70 mile per hour range. When this comes in and actually turns a little bit farther toward from the west to the east, that's when the water is going to blow back into Tampa Bay. You don't want to be down there. Authorities have already said, please don't go down there. Do not go in. Just because it's dry now, it won't be dry for long. So yes, it is now a 90 mile per hour storm, but it still holds an awful lot of power. This is still going to be a hurricane when it exits the East Coast and gets back into the Atlantic Ocean. That's how strong this storm was. It made it all the way across the land and didn't die enough to just be a tropical storm.
Wow. Chad Myers, thank you. We're watching this so closely. I know we can rely on you as well.
Charlotte, we know there's water that shouldn't be where it is. And then if you get down to the other
We know, of course, it's further south, but it's been facing some of Milton's strongest impacts.